Welcome, Shakti sisters, to Feminine Rising. And this particular course here at Sacred You that I'm teaching is about the Shakti rising power that's in the feminine that's rising on the planet at this time. And I'm so excited to share this course with you. I've been doing this, I feel like, my whole life in one form or another, but to really call it out and to call it specifically the Shamanic Shakti, and acknowledging that all of the energies that come through us are elemental, that we are elemental beings. And perhaps in feminine bodies this time, we are very elemental shamanic beings. And all we have to do is ask our partners to confirm that, for those of us who have been in relationships, how changeable we are and how connected to the elemental forces we are of water and earth and fire and air and the spirit that animates all of those things. So thank you for joining us. And before we really start moving today into this course that's going to give you an overview of some of the goddesses that you're going to be meeting, some of the archetypes you're going to be connecting with, and some of the principles and energies behind the elemental feminine and the Shakti rising itself, I want to do an invocation with you. And we'll be beginning each of our segments with an invocation, because part of what I want you to do is to, in some ways, kind of move out of the mindset that this is a course and a class that you have to take notes with, because you will be getting some PDFs and you'll be getting some guidance afterwards with some meditations. But I'd really like to invite you, while I would like for you to have your own journal so you can make notes, and especially afterwards when you reflect, but to really show up in the moment and to be here with your whole presence, to bring all of your Shakti to our time together. And let this be a living ceremony and ritual. Because when we go through ritual experiences with one another, when we really drop into the elementals of our bodies, then we take like an instant photo, if you will, an instant picture of that in every cell of our bodies. And we can pull it up right from our cells, from our 100 trillion, million, gazillion cells that are in our bodies. Once we've taken that photograph with that cellular memory, it's there. And all we have to do is go back within and just breathe and reboot and bring it up, and the programs are there as we create the new ones through ritual and ceremony. So what I'd like to do right now is to do a bit of drumming and to officially welcome you into this ceremony. So I will say to you that I'm here in my home and sitting in the area where I frequently sit and write and sometimes meditate. And I have all my things around you, which you can't see a lot of them, but I have my bookshelf with all my favorite books on it. I have musical instruments around me. I have Venus behind me with my, who's my patron goddess, if you will, Venus Rising, which is the name of my organization, Venus Rising Association for Transformation. I also have, lying here on the floor where you cannot see them, my two dogs, which is Mystic Wolf and Anubis Wolf. So if you hear the pitter-patter of little wolf feet or bark, I'm not going to edit that out. I'm not a shaman on the weekends. I'm a shaman 24/7. So this is the way I live, with my animals, my creatures, my sacred objects, and what's important to me and what's sacred to me. So I hope that you're not living a double life either. I hope that you're living your truth as a Shakti rising woman. And if you're not, I hope by the time this series is over, you're either fully living that more fully, or you're beginning to, or finding how to through these tools that we're offering you in all of these classes. So I want to begin by calling on the spirit of the wolf and calling on the spirit of the blue star, the energies from the great above, the energies from the great below. It's said that wolves don't howl at the moon, they howl at the stars. And they're not howling just for the heck of it. We'll maybe occasionally. But they're howling because they remember where they came from. And they're calling for the energies of the great above and the archetypal energies of higher love and wisdom to come back to this planet, to be embodied in their earth walk. And so I encourage you to join me in this invocation to call out to the energies of the blue star, to call out the energies of the wolf that we walk our true path, and call the energies of all things that we love and all things that love us to guide us on this journey to raising up our power, our passion, our purpose. To activating the Kundalini, the Shakti energy that flows through our bodies freely, creatively, unapologetically, when we're free. The energies that remember our ancestors, that also knows our future, that knows our becoming as well as what we've already become. It is the Shakti that guides us in between the worlds. So take a deep breath, sisters. Breathe in, breathe out. Trust the breath. Trust the elements within you. And just as I've said, trust the breath. If you can hear the chimes in the background, all outside, circling my house, all the chimes. The wind has picked up. The spirits are with us. I want to invite you now to come into the temple, to come into the temple of the heart, to come into the temple of the sacred spiral, the sacred wheel that never stops turning, that is always turning, activating the elements of water, earth, fire, air, and spirit that lives within us, in every living thing, and all around our planet, into the universe and beyond. So come to the temple, come. 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 So I'd like for you to take just a moment, if you did not close your eyes during that ceremony, to close your eyes wherever you are. Hopefully you're sitting down. But even if you're standing up, to just stand there for a moment and to close your eyes and to take another big, deep breath and exhale fully. And really allow yourself to feel yourself in your body. This body, this flesh, this skin, this bone, this blood, this heartbeat, this activity of the brain, of the mind, everything that's happening, the metabolism in your body, all the elementals that are interacting with one another inside of you and around you in the outer world are talking to you all the time through your thoughts, through your emotions, through your intuition, through your gut, through your instincts. All the time, they're speaking to you and informing you as to what's going on in your inner world and what's going on in your outer world. And when you or I don't listen, when we don't listen to the elements, that's our ancestors, the great netters, the great nature spirits, when we don't listen to them, then we stop listening to ourselves. And when we stop listening to ourselves, we find ourselves feeling off course, feeling out of sync with ourselves. As we know, life happens and shift happens, and those places of birth and death and rebirth can knock anyone off of their game for a while, can knock anyone out of center. Perhaps it's supposed to shake us loose sometimes because we've gotten too comfortable with something instead of continuing to grow. We're trying to stay like a plant that's overgrown its pot that it's in, and the roots are all root bound and holding on to the roots too much, and it actually stops producing fruit or blossoms because it just can't take in the nutrition. It needs a bigger pot, it needs more soil, it needs larger ground. So that's okay, but sometimes we find ourselves in a place, no matter where we are, even if we're in a pot big enough for our roots, even if we have plenty of rain and perhaps sunshine, there's a place in which we're not feeling fed. There's a place in which we're not being nurtured. And it's because we're not listening to ourselves. And what does it mean to say that we're listening to ourselves? Well, I know a lot of time I say, I listen to my heart. But what does that mean other than, for some people it begins to feel a little cliche, like I listen to my heart. Does that mean I'm listening to my emotions? Does it mean I'm being more logical and I'm, having more of a Buddha mind and listening to my mind? What does it mean to listen to Shakti rising? What does it mean to listen to the elements of Shakti? It's so elemental, and sorry for the pun, it's elemental, Watson, Sherlock would say. It's so elemental, it's like we are taking our parents and our grandparents and our ancestors for granted. It's like, oh, well, what do you know? You're only millions, billions of years old. What do you know? And yet what survived on this planet, obviously, and will probably survive beyond all of us, and probably until the sun goes out someday and the planet turns into something else, it's so obvious it's the elements. They must be the wisest, eldest teachers and ancestors. And in Egypt and other ancient cultures, Sumeria, other ancient cultures, and through all the cultures of that have come from those places, from Africa and Egypt and Sumeria and Nigeria, and coming through those places into Greek and Rome and the Celtic energies of the Scottish and the Irish and the English, and the deep cultures of South America, all around our planet. There have always been elemental goddesses and gods and acknowledgments of who they are and what they're bringing to us. And another way to think of them as not only gods and goddesses, but is as archetypes. And what does that mean to think of them as archetypes? Probably many of you who are here today are aware of what archetypes are. But just in case you're not, they are the types. They are the forms that are the psychic blueprints in our consciousness. And I'm going to be explaining more about that as we go along. But they are the ones that set the blueprint for us. In other words, the path, the map for change, for alchemical change. And if you're going to work with alchemy and alchemical change, it means you're going to work with the elements. And if you're going to work with the elements, you're going to work with the archetypes. Perhaps it makes it easier sometimes for human beings to imagine the gods or goddesses in our own forms, or that we are modeled after them, that we ourselves are the archetypal impressions or outward forms of these archetypal forces. And that's often how I think about it, that these forces, if you will, they send pictures of themselves into our emotions, into our elements, into our minds. And then people depict them on cave walls and drawings, or perhaps on the ceilings of chapels, or in clay forms. And I'll be showing you some of those. I'm going to show you a couple right now. Here's one that is really incredible, and this is called a Naga. And I'll be speaking more about her later, so I'm not going to go into a lot about her, except to say I believe that she's probably one of the most powerful archetypal gods, goddesses of all, because for me, she incorporates all the elements, and perhaps is one of the original, maybe the first of her kind. Another goddess that means a lot to me is Venus. Some call her Venus Aphrodite, the goddess of love. And I call her the goddess of higher love and higher wisdom. She's not only about physical love, but she's also about spiritual love and about bringing the energy higher. What I mean by that is raising the kundalini all the way through her chakras, not missing any of them along the way, and not leaving any of them behind, but turning on all of the centers, rising from the depths, rising from the waters, and rising all the way to her crown, and embodying all the elements of love and wisdom. And for my astrologer friends, they say that the planet Venus itself really represents our values and what it is that we love and hold dear. So to me, Venus rising, and that's again what I named my organization 22 years ago, was about rising up out of the depths of a particular death I had gone through and rebirthing myself with a greater love and wisdom for having gone through that process. And Venus came to me at that time and said, come from your heart, come from love, come from higher love and wisdom around this circumstance I was going through, and you will embody that, and you will bring your teachings forward in a different way. And she was very prophetic in that as an archetype, and she has been with me ever since. I'd like to show you one more archetype, and this is a form of Venus, but she really is more that form of Gaia or Pachamama, because you can see this is a stone, and can you see her belly here? And in the back, it's her nice round butt. And this is a stone that I found in Greece. And this particular archetype came to me when I called and said, speak to me and talk to me and tell me if you're real, goddess, if you're real, great goddess of the earth and the seas and the elements, because I was really breaking away from some of my own stereotypes about what spirit, how it came clothed. And this was the stone that I hit my toe on as I walked by the waters on this island in Greece. And she's been with me for quite a while. And even though I personally was working with Aphrodite at the time, I really understood that this was the Great Mother in all of her forms, and that she's pregnant with all of life. And when I came back to the States, I looked this up in an archaeological book and actually found this stone very similar to this. So I think this is not only a stone, but I think it is that just happens to be carved this way. I think that someone probably thousands of years ago actually carved this stone, and it showed that this, the way you would know that is in the back, if it had this rounded butt that made it look like a bird, that the ancient goddesses were bird goddesses. They were pregnant and they were giving birth to the egg of humanity. So again, we have so many archetypes that I'm going to be speaking about during our time together. And I just gave you a little overview of some of the energies of the goddess and the archetypes, but I'm specifically going to be speaking about the elemental Shakti feminine archetypes through each segment. For instance, in the first segment, I'm going to be speaking about the breath. And we're going to be doing some breathing during that segment. And I'd like to begin there because I really want us to learn how to utilize the breath, because it's what I've been teaching for more than 30 years, of how to go into an altered state and open myself and to raise up my Kundalini, my Shakti, my life force energy to wherever I need for it to go. Whether I need for it to go to some sort of physical healing in my body, whether I need for it to open my heart and renew my spirit, whether I need for it to move into my upper chakras to give me a bigger picture in some way, or I need for it to move into my creativity and my lower chakras, more sensual energy of pleasure and creativity. So the breath, more than anything I've ever done, and I've tried many, many things in my life, and I really settled on that my spiritual path was breathing. So it's rather simple. So I'm going to be speaking specifically about a goddess that will help you with your breath. And I'm really excited to talk about her. And her name is Serket. And she's an Egyptian goddess. And I'll explain my most recent discovery and journey with her, which is very exciting. And I can't wait to introduce you to her. And she's really speaking to me a lot right now. And telling me to do a lot more breath work myself. So she'll be guiding us on the breathwork journey, and I'll be calling her in. And I'm also going to be working with the elements, of course, of water, and we're going to be working with the Orisha goddesses, if you will. And she's known by many names, Oshun, and she's kind of a South Africa, South America, Cuban goddess. She runs in the waters, and some people say that she's one of the greatest of all the water deities or water archetypes. And she causes the waters to rise up. And right now we're very aware of the waters for numerous reasons. We're aware of them because many places there's droughts around the world. There's an imbalance. And then some places it's flooding and the waters, it's raining over in places that usually don't have rain. So it's a very interesting time that the waters themselves are very erratic. And the waters perhaps inside of our own bodies, which many times we refer to as a type of being very sorrowful or a lot of grief, or that we can't experience our own grief or sorrow. That people are experiencing kind of the extremes of those, either not in touch with their grief and their sorrow, or either feeling really depressed and kind of waterlogged. So we'll be talking about that and how to let that come up and how to feel that we can go back into the waters and renew ourselves. And I love working with the water, and at the same time, the water has not been my strongest suit. And I'll talk a little bit during that time about burnout and how when we don't go to the water will come after us. And that's not a threat. It's actually a rescue. But it may not feel that way when it comes, when we're kind of forced to take time for ourselves and go back into the waters. I'll also be speaking about going into the earth, and not just into the earth, but deep down into our roots. And that means going down sometimes into the underworld a bit, like Persephone did. And so I'll be speaking about how if we don't go deep enough, that we don't put down roots and we don't nourish ourselves and we can't grow corn. We can have all the most wonderful ideas in the world. We can breathe, we can get inspiration, and we can have the best ideas. And yet, if we cannot implement them, if we can't put down roots and we can't put something into form, take it from formlessness into form, we cannot grow corn. And I put that on my Facebook page the other day, and that said, a quote from me that said, if it doesn't grow corn, I'm not interested. And some 3 or 4 people said, what does that mean? And I'll go more into what that means. But right now, just know that it means that if you don't put down roots, if you don't plant something, if you don't put something in the earth, it cannot grow. You cannot get nourishment. And if you can't do that, you cannot bring your corn into fruition. You can't feed yourself. You can't feed the people. And whether you prefer to think of growing flowers or growing wheat or your favorite vegetable or fruit tree, the corn is the metaphor for what we cannot grow and feed ourselves and feed others if we do not come into the earth. So Persephone definitely took that seriously and took a deep dive, and is really responsible for the seasons. So Persephone is one of those Greek Roman goddesses that goes by many names, because all the goddesses and all the gods, all the archetypes show up at different times and different eras. And again, when we speak a little bit more about that in depth later on, I'll give you more information about that. But the Persephone is going to be our main goddess that tells us it's okay. It's all right to go down and meet Hades. It's all right to go down and meet your shadow. In fact, if you don't go down and meet it, it will definitely come to meet you. So maybe be a little proactive about owning our darkness and going into it, and then knowing that it's going to be compost for our soul's journeys and for the Shakti rising. If you want your Shakti rising to be grounded, then Persephone is your gal. And then we're also going to be going into the fires. And if we're going to work with the fire, we're going to need to work with Bridget, or Brigid, as some people say. And I've chosen different goddesses from different cultures in different ages actually, because I wanted people to be in touch with the maiden, the mother, the crone, and there's also the medial woman. And that gets left out sometime when people are speaking about the different kinds of ages for the goddess or for the feminine. But Bridget, and that I will speak about in more depth, is going to be mining, if you will, minding the hearth. And for some, that's Hestia or Vestia, the Vestal Virgin. But Bridget, who frequently represents all that life force energy in the spring, when the spring begins to return, she's going to be stirring the cauldron and watching over the sacred wells and the sacred waters. But she's going to be building the fires within us so that we can transform ourselves and that we can take all of our Shakti energy and bring it fully and passionately into the world, because we're excited and we're enthusiastic, which means we're inspired, inspirited, enthusiastic. So I'm just giving you a little hint about all of these goddesses, and more will make their ways in. But what's exciting about it is that you're going to get an activation from each one of them. And you'll have some homework to do afterwards, working with the egg, working with going into a salt bath, working with yoni eggs. More on that later. Perhaps some of you will want to do some vaginal steaming, which is a purification and healing and transformation. But we're going to be bringing forth a lot of things that we can do to really activate the Shakti, including the breathing. And the last one I want to mention is Inanna. And Inanna is the goddess that I want to call in as our overarching goddess. And I'm not going to say more about her right now, except to say that she too is one of the oldest goddesses and incorporates all of the elements and will bring them together for us. She'll bring together the whole archetypal shamanic journey for us of how to go into the underworld, how to come out of the ethers, go into the underworld, and how to rise again, and how to be even more after you have died, not less. We will be speaking about the spiral path, how to be on it, the elementals, the archetypes, the goddesses, doing activations, invocations, embodying these energies in your everyday life, right where you live, dogs, pets, kids, wind chimes, sometimes I call it your big fat shamanic Shakti rising life. May it be juicy and fun, even when you're dying, and especially when you're rebirthing. So Mystics come up to say goodbye as we get ready to end here. And I think I've covered everything that's actually on my notes, so good for me. And I look forward to seeing you all in the days to come.